Good afternoon. It is Thursday, May 9th. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. Two rockets launched from Syrian territories hit al-Shawari region in Hermel, Lebanon. The army swiftly cordons off the area. Fierce clashes between rebels and fighters loyal to President Bashar al-Assad's regime rage on around insurgent-held Qusayr in central Syria. John Kerry says the United States still believes that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad will not be part of a transitional government in the country. He speaks from Jordan. Two rockets launched from Syrian territories hit the al-Shawari region in Hermel, in north of Lebanon. According to the state-run national news agency, according to the agency, the rockets only caused material damage. The army swiftly cordoned off the area, but fire from the conflict in neighboring Syria has regularly spilled over into Lebanon, killing 2 people in the most recent incident on April 14th. Both rebel forces and regime troops have reportedly been involved in such fire. But officially, Lebanon is observing a neutral stance towards the conflict, pitting rebels against the regime of President Bashar al-Assad. But the uprising has inflamed tensions in the country's multi-confessional population. Here, the March 14 opposition movement has backed the uprising, while the Hezbollah and its allies support Assad. In other news in the country, MP Ali Marouni revealed that the Kataib party took the initiative to propose a draft law concerning Lebanon's dissociation policy, which is the only way, they say, is to maintain the country's stability. We began a tour on all the parliamentary blocs to convince them of our proposal, Marouni said after talks between the Kataib Party and the Free Patriotic Party lawmakers at Parliament. He pointed out that the meeting lacked several issues, saying, quote, "We have a common aim, which is to safeguard Lebanon and distance it from all conflicts that have negative repercussions on it." Kataib Party MP Sami Jmail announced coming forward with a suggestion to amend the preamble of the Constitution to stipulate Lebanon's neutrality towards regional conflicts. The families of the 9 abducted pilgrims in Syria's Azaz since May of last year briefly blocked the road near the Turkish Cultural Center in downtown Beirut amid heavy security deployment. The internal security forces had earlier deployed near the Turkish Cultural Center, which is adjacent to the Turkish Airlines offices in Al-Azariya building. The families vowed to escalate their endeavors until the 9 kidnapped men are released, pointing out that they don't trust the Turkish authorities. They also threatened to obstruct the interests of the Lebanese state for preventing them from protesting and blocking Turkish interests in the country. The protesters argued that Turkey, which is a staunch supporter of the rebels seeking to topple the Syrian regime, should pressure the kidnappers to release the men. Just to remind you, 11 men were kidnapped in May of last year in northern Syria's Aleppo province as they returned by land from a pilgrimage in Iran. 2 of them were released in August and September. Fierce clashes between rebels and fighters loyal to President Bashar al-Assad's regime rage on around insurgent-held Qusayr in central Syria. An army officer said the military seized control of Shumariya village near the town of Qusayr. The Syrian army seized back control of Shumariya and the Qusayr countryside, and troops are currently on their way to the village of Ghassaniya, which has been under rebel control for more than a year. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights confirmed the claim, saying, backed by fighters loyal to Hezbollah, which supports Assad, the Damascus regime launched an intensified bid last month to retake Qusayr. The town fell out of regime control more than a year ago, but has faced daily shelling and frequent aerial bombardment. It is strategically located near the Lebanese border and just south of Syria's third city, Homs, which lies on the road linking Damascus to the coast. The United States still believes that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad will not be part of a transitional government in the country, according to its Secretary of State John Kerry. He made his comments to reporters on the sidelines of a meeting with Jordanian Foreign Minister Nasser Jude in Rome. Kerry also announced during the meeting the United States would be providing in addition $100 million in aid for Syrian refugees. $43 million of that money would be directed to Jordan.
The Foreign Minister will work with us, as they have, to try to bring all of the parties to the table so that we can effect a transition government by mutual consent on both sides, which clearly means that, in our judgment, President Assad will not be a component of that transitional government. The 4th largest city in Jordan today is a tent city, a refugee city. So Jordan feels the impact of what is happening more than any other country. And with that in mind today, President Obama has asked me to and authorized an additional $100 million in aid for humanitarian purposes, 43 million of which will be designated directly to Jordan in order to assist, to relieve the burden that they are currently feeling.
UN peacekeepers are operating on the Golan Heights to monitor the ceasefire line between Syria and the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. But the United Nations said it had relocated some observers because of the precarious security situation in the conflict-torn country. Speaking in New York, a UN spokesperson said UNDOF continues to do its utmost to ensure the implementation of its mandate while mitigating risk to its personnel in light of the evolving security situation. Peacekeepers from Position 86 have been relocated. The UN spokesperson also said the world body was working to secure the release of 4 Filipino observers in the 1,000-member UN Disengagement Observer Force who were detained by a rebel group on Tuesday, adding that UNDOF has indications they are unharmed. 4 peacekeepers were detained as they patrolled close to an area where 21 Filipino observers were held for 3 days in March. Coming up next, Cleveland resident Ariel Castro is charged with 4 counts of kidnapping and rape after 3 missing women were found in his house almost a decade after they disappeared. The details when we return. Welcome back. Leading Muslim cleric Sheikh Yusuf al-Qaradawi began a high-profile visit to Gaza late, giving a boost to the Islamist group Hamas that runs the enclave, but also laying bare Palestinian rivalries. Qaradawi was greeted by Ismail Haniyeh, Prime Minister of Gaza's Hamas government, which has worked hard to bolster its international standing by inviting senior figures to the tiny territory sandwiched between Israel and Egypt. Qaradawi, chairman of the International Federation of Muslim Clerics, has been a vociferous supporter of the revolutions that have shaken the Arab world in the last 2 years. Soon after arriving in the Gaza Strip, the 87-year-old Egyptian-born cleric called on Palestinians, Arabs and Muslims to work together to bring about the downfall of Israel. Fatah supporters shunned the reception thrown for Qaradawi, saying his visit would reinforce internal divisions and support the separatist entity Hamas has established in Gaza. Libya's political crisis has deepened as armed groups surrounding 2 ministries in the capital say they had formed an alliance to present an expanded list of 6 demands that included the resignation of Prime Minister Ali Zaidan. The armed groups initially demanded that Parliament pass the political isolation law, banning senior officials who held a senior position under late Muammar Gaddafi from office, and members had hoped the vote would be enough to dislodge the gunmen from their positions at the government ministries. Instead, the groups have settled in and expanded their list of demands, which they presented to Reuters news agency on a printed notice late on Wednesday. The additional demands included Zaidan's resignation, the freezing of a recently released state budget, and the right to form a committee to take charge of the foreign ministry. Now, the International Criminal Court is still investigating war crimes in Libya, despite a clash with the country's government over who has the right to try former leader Muammar Gaddafi's son and his spy chief, according to the court's prosecutor. The Hague-based court wants to try Gaddafi's son, Saif al-Islam, and Gaddafi's former intelligence chief, Abdullah al-Senussi, on war crimes, but Libya wants the pair to face justice in the North African state.
Mr. President, given the extensive crimes committed in Libya, and the challenges facing the new Libyan government, the ICC's mandate is still essential to ending impunity in Libya. My office thus continues to conduct investigations of crimes committed in Libya. My office is aware of allegations of serious crimes committed by former Gaddafi officials, some of whom are now outside of Libya. We are currently engaged in the process of documenting the most serious of those crimes and documenting the current activities of those officials who were most responsible for them. As the statute dictates, a state seeking a finding of inadmissibility of cases before the ICC must satisfy the judges that it is genuinely investigating and prosecuting the same persons for the same conduct as that under investigation by the Office of the Prosecutor. That is the law, and nothing short of that will suffice.
Afghan President Hamid Karzai says the United States is set to have 9 bases in the country after foreign troops withdraw by the end of 2014 in order to ensure security in Afghanistan. Karzai said they want 9 bases all over Afghanistan, including Kabul, Bagram, Mazar, Jalalabad, Kardiz, Kandahar, Helmand, Shindland, and Herat, and they have agreed to give them the bases. Speaking during the 80th anniversary of Kabul University, Karzai said that the U.S. also needs to help Afghanistan build up its economy. He added, our conditions are that the U.S. should guarantee to bring security in our country and support Afghanistan's forces, as well as build up our economic infrastructure. The White House has yet to decide how many U.S. troops will remain in Afghanistan after 2014. Much depends on progress in negotiations with Karzai on a bilateral security agreement to define the future legal status of U.S. forces. Now for world headlines in brief. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu meets with Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing to promote bilateral ties. The two leaders shook hands before sitting down for talks in the Great Hall of the People. Netanyahu's visit, the first trip by a top Israeli leader to China since former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert visited back in 2007, is mainly focused on trade, although experts have also said he is likely to discuss Iran's nuclear program. The son of former Pakistani Prime Minister Yusuf Raza Gilani has reportedly been kidnapped during a campaign rally in his hometown of Multan. Ali Haidar Gilani was taken during a gunfire at the rally, which apparently killed his personnel secretary and injured others. He is running from 2 constituencies, NA 151 and NA 152, as an independent candidate, but is a member of the Pakistan People's Party, which completed its 5 years in government. The brother of Ali Gilani said in a statement that if his brother is not returned to them by midnight, they will cancel all campaigning in the area of Multan and cancel elections as well. An invited audience gathered near the walls of the Moscow Kremlin to watch the annual Victory Day parade in Red Square. Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the parade with a short speech recalling lessons learned from World War II, called the Great Patriotic War in Russia. The Victory Day parade is held every year on May 9th in Red Square to mark Germany's surrender to the Soviet Union in 1945 and as a showcase for Russia's military forces. Cleveland police released audio of first responders as they found 3 young women who were held captive for 10 years in an Ohio house. Police said the women newly freed from a decade-long kidnapping ordeal in Cleveland endured their captivity in the dungeon-like confines of a squalid house where they were raped, starved, beaten, and kept in chains by the man who abducted them. Their accused tormentor, Ariel Castro, aged 52, a veteran school bus driver fired from his job last fall, was formally charged on Wednesday with kidnapping and raping the women who were rescued from his house on Monday evening, shortly before his arrest. The 3 victims, believed to have been abducted separately from the surrounding neighborhood and held prisoner for years, were found alive together when neighbors were alerted to their presence by cries for help from one of the women, Amanda Berry. She told police that her escape 2 days ago was her first chance to break free in the 10 years that she was imprisoned in the house, during which time she conceived and gave birth to a daughter who is now 6 years old and rescued along with the 3 other women. Freed from the house along with Berry and her daughter were Gina Dijhusis, who is 23, and Michelle Knight, who is 32.
Regarding this case, I just signed criminal complaints charging Ariel Castro with 4 counts of kidnapping and 3 counts of rape. These 7 criminal complaints are first-degree felonies.
There is nothing that leads us to believe that they were involved or they had any knowledge of this. And that comes from statements of our victims and their statements and their brother's statements. So as far as what their relationship was, Ariel kept everybody at a distance. The only opportunity after interviewing the young ladies to escape was the other day when Amanda escaped. So they were in that home. They don't believe that they've been outside of the home for the last 10 years, respectively.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of today's headlines. 2 rockets launched from Syrian territories hit Al-Shawaghi region in Hermel, north of Lebanon, and the army swiftly cordons off the area. Fierce clashes between rebels and fighters loyal to President Bashar al-Assad's regime rage on around insurgent-held Qusaid in central Syria. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says the U.S. still believes that Syrian President Bashar al-Assad will not be part of a transitional government in the country. Those are your Thursday headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Nofal, wishing you a good night.